Howdy, and welcome back to You've Got People Problems, the podcast where we tackle the leadership challenges that no one wants to talk about, but every business faces. I'm your host, Melissa Ortiz with Activate Human Capital Group, and today's conversation is with Steve Jaffe. You'll hear more about his background as we get into the episode, but this conversation really centers on the layoffs that are happening in the marketplace today and what they mean for people on both sides of the table. In this conversation, we'll talk about what people experience emotionally after a layoff and why shame so often shows up in the picture, how leaders and HR professionals can approach layoffs with more empathy and care, and the challenges separating who you are from what you do, and lastly, what helps people rebuild confidence and find purpose during these kinds of transitions. So, this is a little different episode than we typically dive into, but I think it's a really timely and important one. So let's get to it. Howdy, y'all, and welcome to You've Got People Problems. I am your host, Melissa Ortiz, and today I have Steve Jaffe. Tell me I said that right.
You did.
Okay, with me. And we're talking about a little bit different angle. Typically, we're talking about You've Got People Problems from an organizational standpoint, sometimes from a personal standpoint. But this is really where organizations and people intersect in a different way than I think we've evaluated and explored before, and that's about layoffs. And Steve has written a book about this, and I thought it would be a really interesting time. So many people are at transition points in their lives, and I thought Steve could offer some really great wisdom to us. So welcome, Steve. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your decision to write this book.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. Steve Jaffe. I'm the author of the book, The Layoff Journey, From Dismissal to Discovery, Navigating the Stages of Grief After a Job Loss. And the book was born out of my own personal experience. Over the course of my career, I was laid off 4 times, and I found that there was a very big difference between my first layoff and my last layoff. And as I did some self-exploration and examination, I realized that I learned a set of skills to cope with a layoff that allowed me to move through it very quickly compared to the first time I was laid off. And I felt like this would be really good information to share with people. Layoffs are becoming so prevalent. It's almost not a question of if you're going to get laid off, but when. So why not have this roadmap ready to go so that when you do get laid off, you can kind of break the glass in case of emergency and have it handy. I think that anyone going through a layoff, or even if you're in the HR profession and you're on the other side of the desk, it's really good to know what people are facing and kind of what it feels like from their point of view.
That is an interesting perspective I hadn't thought about, but what a powerful tool to have at your disposal if you're one of the ones having to deliver that news and develop more empathy and really see it. Maybe it's a parting gift as well. I don't
Yeah,
know. There's some interesting things we could explore there. Well, welcome. I'm
yeah.
looking forward to this discussion and just peppering you with lots of questions to explore this. What was really different between the first and the fourth experience. If you're joining because you know Steve and you don't know me, my name is Mel Ortiz, and I am really passionate about helping people find the seats that are the right seats for them, that unlock their talents, that they make the best contributions of their lives, that they're engaged in their work. Because what I see in the research I've done over the last 18 years is that when we are engaged in our work, we are giving more to our organizations, to our internal and external customers. But oh, by the way, we go home with more energy and gas in the tank for our family, our faith, our physical well-being. And so I'm hopeful that I work very closely with organizations trying to find the right people for the right seats so that they can thrive. I also do a little bit of coaching one-on-one and resume rework with people who are in the transition phase and really positioning themselves to launch to the next opportunity. So I'm super jazzed about this discussion. Steve, tell me, you mentioned there was a big difference between the first and the fourth. I assume you're not saying that it was handled more effectively the fourth time, or that there was a way better severance package. I assume there's something in your own head that was different in your own heart.
Yeah,
Start
yeah,
us there.
yeah,
What
yeah. Okay.
compare and contrast
Yeah,
for us, if you will.
yeah. So I'll set the stage, kind of set the clock back. It's spring of 2001. and I'm living in San Francisco. I had just gotten married. I had a great job at a great ad agency, uh, really great account, great client. Everything was going great. It was literally and figuratively the springtime of my life. And what I didn't know was that the first dot-com bubble bursting was right around the corner. And I learned about that firsthand when I got called into a conference room and was told in very short order, thank you, but the client has reduced their budget and we have to cut staff. And thank you, you have 5 minutes to clean out your desk. And that was a shocking experience. I was not prepared for it at all. I very much had bought into kind of what I call the myth of meritocracy, which is if you work hard, you will be rewarded with success. And instead, I was rewarded with a layoff, and I had a really hard time making sense of that. It took me quite a while to recover from it. I had put a lot of my own self-worth and like my personal investment in the job, and I was really defining myself and my identity through what I did.
Sure.
And that was probably one of the biggest things that I learned in retrospect. So now, fast forward, it's summer 2023. It's my fourth layoff. And over the course of time and like wisdom and maturity, I've learned that, deriving your self-worth and like your sense of who you are from your job and from what you do and what's printed on your business card is really not a great recipe for success, because those things can get taken away from you, and they do when you lose your job. In that fourth layoff, I sailed through it. It was like water off a duck's back, and it was this lesson in, for one thing, layoffs can really bring a sense of shame and embarrassment, because you feel like, well, what did I do wrong? What is wrong with me that I was laid off? And the answer is really, there isn't anything wrong with you, and it was no fault of your own. Layoffs are a no fault termination. It's not like being fired where you've done something wrong. Layoffs, essentially, you're kind of in the wrong place at the wrong time. The business is going through a budget exercise, and they need to drive revenue to their bottom line as soon as possible. And layoffs are the way to do that. It's quicker than driving sales. So you learn that not only should you not derive your self-worth from the job, but you also shouldn't read into any sort of like hidden meaning about what it says about you. The shame and embarrassment is something that I really try and bring light to, because about 40% of all Americans have been laid off at least once in their career, but it's not really openly talked about. People don't really share, and they're not really keen to share their own layoff experience and what it meant to them, because people carry kind of that burden. And what I would love to do is people to like release themselves from that. By doing so, it allows you to open up and share with your network and your community, your mentors, your friends, your family. And what you'll find then is that 40% of people who have been laid off also have their own knowledge and experience to share with you. And then it also brings the networking capability of the hidden job market. So when somebody knows you've been laid off and you're out of work, they're going to help you find your next job. More often than not, your next job probably won't come from applying to a job board with 1,000 other resumes. They're going to come from probably someone like you, Mel, or that friend or colleague that you know that's going to recommend you for a job that's never even made it onto a job board. So,
especially, I would think if I've been through that experience and I know the quality of your character,
right.
I'm that much more motivated to help you find your next gig, because I've been there and I viscerally remember how it feels.
Right.
Yeah.
So, the first step is letting go of that shame and embarrassment, and not feeling like you were somehow at fault. Then communicating it, sharing it with your network. All of those things are great ways to move on and move through it. And that was probably the difference between the first and the fourth. But also along the way, I learned a lot of really good coping skills, self-care, things that became like non-negotiables for me in order to give myself the skills necessary to survive any type of difficult experience, a layoff certainly being one of them. So you mentioned like like your self-care, and your spiritual wholeness, that whole body approach, mind, body, spirit, and nurturing that every day gives you the ability to approach these difficult circumstances in ways that you have a lot more in the tank. So I write about the stages of grief associated with the layoff. And in the stages of grief, there's things like denial and anger and bargaining and depression. If you're filling your tank and you have a whole body approach to your overall health and well-being, when things like, let's say, depression from a layoff roll around, you have the skills to negotiate that in a way that it may not hold you back if you don't have that self-care routine built up.
Let's dig deeper into that because you talked about decoupling your self-worth from
Yeah,
what I do
yeah,
to who I am.
yeah,
I think that sounds really nice to a lot of us.
yeah,
Tactically, how do we do that? I mean, there
yeah.
are a lot of people who are still, I think the younger people are, the less inclined they are to do that. They maybe are smarter than we are. But like I think about my grandfather, I think that it was the late 50s, early 60s. He was a millwright. So he did all the things in a sawmill and he was amazing. He was laid off and he was devastated. My
Yeah,
mom talks about him sitting at the kitchen table every day basically all day for 6 months in a total state of depression, trying to figure out what am I going to do next. And he said, I will never work for someone else again because it just destroyed his sense of self-worth.
right.
And having a child watch that in a parent, that's the last thing we ever want our children to have to see, but also last thing we want to experience. So fast forward to today where we have young people who are really great at self-care and exploring
Right.
themselves in the world. What tips do you have for us to make that journey, whether we have been laid off or haven't? It's a healthy exercise.
Yeah, and I think that's the generational wisdom of observing those family members who, they would have a job for, let's say, 30 years, had one job. When they retired, they got a gold watch, and that doesn't exist anymore. Um, the younger generations have watched their family members, their parents, get laid off, and they see that the loyalty that was given to the company isn't rewarded, it's not reciprocated. So what they've done is they've put their priorities first. A lot of times they may have side gigs, so they're already working on something in addition to what they've got going on the 9 to 5 job, where they're investing in themselves. If and when they get laid off, they have something to kind of fall back on, right? Um, they also take, I think, a much more active approach to the idea of a work-life balance, meaning, they'll work hard, but the way we would work, maybe 60, 70 hours a week and not have time or energy for anything else, they very much kind of hold a boundary around what their work hours are. And they will invest in things outside of their work life, whether it's friends, family, like hobbies, other pursuits, so that they kind of have like a whole person. I remember working, if I'm working 50, 60 hours a week, probably didn't have a lot of time for friends or outside relationships beyond the work relationships. I didn't have a lot of time for like hobbies or things that brought me joy outside of work. So if and when you lose that job, you lose your community, all those people that you worked with that were your family, they're gone. Um, and if I'm deriving my joy and my fulfillment from the job and that goes, like, what am I left with? So I think I love what you're framing around, like, finding the right people for the right job. And one of the things in my book I talk about is sometimes a layoff is an opportunity for a pivot. And in the pause that a layoff allows, you can do some self exploration and determine, um, does my career path align with my personal values and my own mission and North Star? Um, does it bring me joy? And is it something that, like, fills my cup?
Or was
And
I just trading days for dollars?
right,
And
exactly.
if that's the case, hard stop.
Right,
We need a new path. We need a new
right,
set of options, and maybe this is the best thing that could happen. Sounds
right.
horrible to say, but maybe. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
interesting.
So, you may find that a pivot is necessary, maybe for personal alignment of values and things, but also maybe, like, from my own experience, the marketing field that I was in was under contraction. Like, jobs were being eliminated left and right, but there was new growth in another area of marketing, and I found I was able to, kind of reframe my experience and my resume in a way that would be applicable for those jobs. You can also retrain, upskill, do other things to, ride the tide of where the jobs are going and where the industry is going, and away from, maybe where the contraction is happening. So the through that examination, you can find a new direction and some clarity, and that's where, so I have the 7 stages of grief that were derived from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's research. And I mentioned the first four, which were anger, bargaining, depression, and denial. The last three there are, where you have kind of the light at the end of the tunnel, and it's, acceptance and reconstruction and renewal. And that's where you find that insight about, like, is what I'm doing bringing me joy? And if it's bringing me joy, I'm going to get a lot more fulfillment out of it. And that's where I think, uh, I would never say that layoffs are like a blessing in disguise. They absolutely suck, but, you can find some, benefit, and you can find within the experience an opportunity to come out, with, some clarity.
It's interesting. One of the things I work with employers on is the single best retention technique right now for employees for just keeping good people, assuming you're not in a contraction phase, is investing in their growth,
Yeah,
because that for people in the market today is even more valuable than money, is
yeah,
what we see in our engagement surveys.
yeah,
And so investing in people and helping them be more valuable to the marketplace is scary for employers because they don't want people to leave. But if
right,
they're not better for you, our company is backsliding.
right,
So that's scary. The other thing I think when I do resume work with people, some people have kept up on their resume and continually added things, even if it isn't in the perfect formatting. They've got notes on what have I done, what have my results been. And then other people who are blindsided by something like a layoff are people who've not written a single thing down about what they've accomplished in the last 5 years potentially. And then we're going back in time and trying to recreate
yeah,
these bullet points really from scratch. And so that's one thing I'd love for people to be thoughtful about in their careers. And I think the younger you are, the more aware you are of this because they're not afraid to hop around,
hmm,
is continually keeping track of what projects have I worked on? How did they go? What were the results? Asking for feedback on, okay, did we save the company money? How much?
hmm,
Or did we gain efficiencies? What does that look like? And that's a really healthy thing for us to be proactively doing.
hmm.
Um, that
Yeah.
makes that sometimes transition a little easier, I think.
Always keep like a little side thing somewhere on your computer of your successes. like whatever it was that you were achieved, and do it with the metrics like you were talking about. Achieved X amount of revenue savings over this amount of time, you know, drove this amount of revenue, increased product usage, all of those things. Yeah, that way, then when you do have to update your resume, they're ready to go, because it'll be difficult to remember them, and then difficult to get your hands on what those statistics were when you've been separated from the company. You don't have access to that computer anymore.
And
So
if all you're
yeah,
doing is spit and polish on that, that's a huge
right.
difference. And I mean, I can even envision, depending on your role, you can ask ChatGPT, what kind of metrics might I be tracking? If my company hasn't placed good metrics around my role,
Yep.
I can start tracking them and talk about becoming a more valuable employee when you're looking for ways to measure yourself. And then if you're sharing those up the food chain, it's like, hey, here's what I'm aiming at this quarter. That can change sometimes potentially your journey
Yeah.
and your own sense of self-worth,
Right.
even in the
Right.
workplace, even as you're building that outside of the workplace.
Yeah.
I would say it's a lot easier to derive. As I think about my lifetime, I probably started off come from a very, very hardworking family,
Mhm.
family farm, very physically hard, demanding work, and so much of your life is your work.
Yeah.
And then once you have kids, you're like, oh, wow, this is a whole nother sense of self-worth. And I was evaluating, I don't know, maybe a month ago, like, do I still have hobbies? I feel like all I do is kid stuff, work stuff, volunteer stuff, and needing to recalibrate and do a few things for me because I'd
Right.
kind of gotten off track there. And it is a continual effort to, I don't know, make
Yeah.
yourself a priority, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, those things, like you mentioned, those things can bring joy, and those things can bring fulfillment. It's important that you have joy and fulfillment on like some of your own personal interests. But having some of those things outside of work are what's really important. So that when you do lose that job, you don't lose everything. Like everything is gone, right?
I also think there's something, I'm biased because I think everybody should find their amazing talents and do more of those things. So,
Mhm.
what I often think is like if you are in a type of job that you really do love, you found the right seat, and something happens, like you were talking about your first layoff, it's like there's a market contraction, there's nothing we can do. It's nothing about your performance.
But
If that's something you really enjoy, finding ways to do that in volunteer organizations, like if I couldn't get paid for what I do, I would still keep doing it because it brings me an incredible amount of joy to
mhm,
help people continually name, claim, and aim their talents.
mhm, mhm,
And so I think about doing that for nonprofits. I've done like couples nights where I bring a bunch of friends to the table and everybody took the Gallup Strengths Finder ahead of time. And I won't tell anybody whose strengths are what, and they all have to guess just because I love this work. And so I think that's something, if you have found the right path, the more you're telling the world and showing people what you have to offer, the more people are in your network that will then be supporting you as you launch your next opportunity.
mhm.
And so I think that's one of the things that, yeah, finding your own thing. But if your work really is your life's work, there are so many ways to contribute, whether you're an accountant, whether you're a marketing person, there are infinite ways that then also contribute to your self-worth. I run a swim team for
Mhm.
100 kids. I don't get
Mhm.
paid. It's a ton of work, but I care very deeply about kids and water safety. I had a cousin that drowned
Mhm.
and it was devastating to me. He was
Mhm.
very,
Mhm.
very close um, family member, and finding those things that, I don't know, fill that hole in your life and it's an exponential gain.
Yeah.
Um, I think some people don't lean into the unpaid part of life
Right.
that can bring whether that's through your church, whether it's, love working with kids or you love working with elderly people. Find something that there's more tangible relationships than just come from your job. And
Right. 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 I'm a big believer in like being of service and finding a way in your community or in some way to be of service to others, particularly after you've gone through a layoff. And you kind of everything is looking inward, and you're very focused on yourself and what it is that you're going through, what's been taken away from you in your job and your paycheck and your health insurance. you can get very like inward looking in a not great way. Getting out of yourself, getting out of that frame of mind and being of
And out of
service
your
to
head.
others, yeah, is a great way to really kind of lift your head up and help others. When you're helping others, there's just a great sense of fulfillment and well-being that is really, really wonderful. So one of the kind of the many self-care things that you can do um, in that grief is to get out of yourself, go be of service to others, volunteer, help the community in any way, find something that you can do for others. A really, really great mental health practice.
It's also what I find a really great way if you're thinking about a career shift, whether you're in a layoff situation or not, and you want ways to explore, a volunteer role is a perfect way to gain experience, gain stories, but also gain confidence. I think so much of life, I spend a lot of time talking to kids because I'm on the local school board. And one of the things I think it's totally bogus that we ask people what they want to be when they grow up. It's
Mm-hmm.
a totally unfair question. We don't even as adults, we don't even know what's out there.
Mm-hmm.
I think what's really valuable to people, though, is figuring out what we don't want to do.
Mm-hmm.
If you can take an entire sector and say, I don't want to be anywhere near healthcare,
Mm-hmm.
or I don't want to be in public service, I don't want all these things, that takes an entire swath of the economy out. And you're
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, great. That lets me focus then on what's next. Because it's easier to say no to things
Mm-hmm.
than to say, oh, yes, I'm very passionate about this. I want to dedicate the rest of my career to this one thing. That's a lot of pressure. I don't even know how to do that yet.
Right.
But the no's are like, meh, no, thank you.
Yeah.
And you
Right.
can
Right.
figure out in an afternoon of job shadowing or a volunteer experience, this is a no, or oh, that's interesting.
Right.
That was fun. That brought me
Right.
satisfaction. I think I'd want to do more of that.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
great low risk
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. Well, here's the other benefit too of that volunteer being of service is when you get laid off, you lose that community, right? All of those people, your network, your friends, the people you were in the foxhole with, and you need to rebuild that community, right? You need to um, engage your network, your friends, your family, your mentors. Through that volunteer work, you can find new community. But you also lose your routine, right? You go to the office 9 to 5, you have a daily routine that you also need to replace. And that can be just as hard for people. And finding in the volunteer work and that service work part of how you're building your day now and going forward so that you're not exclusively just trying to apply to jobs all day, every day, which can
Yeah.
really drain your energy. Really, really good thing to add into your routine is something small that you can do to help others. Yeah, for sure.
I love that. Tell me about resources. We've talked about the different stages of grief. What resources really helped you in your journey? What do you recommend to people, whether it's books, podcasts, videos? What
Mhm.
tools? What comes to mind there?
There's a wonderful group that I really, really love a lot. It's on Substack. It's called Laid Off. A wonderful group of people who have been laid off that are just supporting each other. Wonderful community that's been built there. Um, Something that people can do for themselves
So
is,
actually, I'm going to pause you before you go on.
yeah.
I don't know what Substack is. I probably should.
Oh, that's okay. It's kind of like an online blog platform.
Okay.
So if you go to the website substack.com and you search for laid off, you'll
Okay.
be able to find it. There's a woman who runs it. Her name is Melanie, and she's great. And it's a community of people telling their laid off stories. And within there then is like a kind of a chat group that people will offer support and resources for each other. And it's very genuine and authentic. And it's people from all walks of life too. So you hear about people's laid off stories that you may not have otherwise heard from. And you kind of start to get this maybe bigger picture of the world of layoffs and how people are being impacted, and the commonalities. The commonalities of grief and how people move through those stages, and maybe where some people get tripped up in a certain stage, or how it can trigger other emotions and things. So it's a great place, full of a lot of empathy, I think. Um, but
Okay, sorry,
things,
go on. I
yeah,
interrupted
yeah,
you.
no, that's okay. Things people can do for themselves, um, you know, exercise, get out, get some fresh air. When you're moving your body, you're releasing a lot of really great natural chemicals, serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin. Those are great at battling depression, right? Make sure you're getting plenty of rest. Sleep is really important. One of the things I think is important here is, even in a small way, find something to be thankful for and find something to express gratitude for. A gratitude practice when you've been laid off will really help your mind get out of the loop of what you've lost. And thinking about what you have is a really kind of great way to rewire your mind in this time. Um, it's a lot has been taken, but you know, giving some time to what you still have is important. Um, Diet is important, really healthy diet. So diet, exercise, sleep,
Lots of the
gratitude,
stuff we're supposed to be doing anyway, I'm
right?
hearing.
Right. These are all really great self-care practices.
Yeah.
So when you are faced with this traumatic life event, these are things that are going to give you that like baseline to get
They
through it
almost
in a
heighten in
way.
importance.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Interesting. Um, I'll throw one in. There's a book by Brene Brown, who's very well
Mm,
recognized in the
mhm,
shame and vulnerability space. But
mhm,
I think one of her lesser known works is called Men, Women, and Worthiness.
mm,
And it is phenomenal. It
mm.
is, it's one my husband and I listen to together probably once a year. We'll find time to be, on the road or something together on a road trip. And it looks at different gender roles and shame and how to move past shame. And it is something, whether you're in this journey of a layoff or just going through your life, it is a very, very powerful
Mm.
way to deal with a lot of things that we're talking about. And she's charming and funny, and
Yeah,
it's not very long. So the audio, I would definitely recommend the audio because she reads it and she's just charming. I love Brene Brown.
I love Brene Brown too. I have a quote from her in the beginning of my book that says something like, one day you'll tell your story and it'll be someone else's survival guide. And that for me was how I really felt about the book that I wrote. I took a lot of inspiration from her.
She has this process that comes up. I'm sure she talks about it elsewhere, but in this book, Men, Women, and Worthiness, she talks about a shame spiral. When you
Mm,
start shaming yourself and you can feel yourself just going down this rabbit hole. And she says her method is to call a friend or even text them and say, pain, pain, pain. Like I am way down the rabbit hole and I don't know how to get out.
yeah,
And whoever she reaches out to, there are very, very few close friends that you can do that with, but no, like this is an emergency. This person needs me. And like, all right, go.
right,
And
right, right, right. Yeah,
it's one of the things it's like it's a way to cut it off even in your own brain and be like, okay, pain, pain, pain. This is
yeah,
really bad.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah, yeah, yeah. There's something I like about, the one that grows is the one that you feed. If you
mm,
feed shame, shame is going to grow, right? If you feed positive self-confidence and self-worth and self-image, that's what's going to grow. So being aware of what you give time and energy to is what's going to grow, right? So make sure that you're putting your thoughts and your energy in the right place.
it's interesting. I was talking to a business owner yesterday. This is exactly what you're talking about. And she was talking about, I was in an entrepreneurs group, and she said, my business is like really, really, really bad right now, really scary, really terrible. And we were talking about a lot of strategies for growth. And all I could think about was her sitting next to me going, these people have no idea what I'm dealing with. Growth, I just want to survive.
Mhm.
And so I leaned over and I said, I feel like this exercise might be better for you if you were looking at the strategy for someone to acquire your business, and I want you to envision somebody that's coming out of, she's a esthetician,
Yeah.
somebody who's coming out of beauty school, who has
Mhm.
a really rich dad and just wants to set her up with a business. And she has a great network, and all she really needs are processes and some marketing. And I want you to envision someone you're going to nurture to
Mhm.
grow this business because she's really ready psychologically to just be done with it.
Mm.
And she's like, I don't have the financial ability to be just done with it. And I'm like, okay, great. Forget all these other things that we're talking about. Focus your energy on, okay, I'm going to find this girl and she's going to be amazing and I'm going to support her. And she has someone with financial backing that wants to set her up and see her survive and thrive quickly. And
Mhm.
she's like, oh my God, this is so great. That's exactly where I'm going to channel my energy because I could just feel her feeling so down on herself
Mhm.
and shame, shame, shame. Like I could just, it was radiating off of her. And I was like, okay, you need a new script in your head. She goes, oh my God, that was so helpful because that's exactly where I was. Like,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Sometimes like it takes that outsider to say, listen, you're kind of done with this, right? You need to get like your actions in line with like where your head is. And because sometimes you're still going down this road that you don't want to be on, and you think it's too hard to get off it, rather than stay on it. But really the only choice really is to just get off it. Yeah.
it's the first rule of holes, right? Stop digging.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I talk a lot about the hamster wheel, and just stop running on the hamster wheel.
Yeah. So much easier said than done. And I think
It
so many of my
is.
friends are entrepreneurs.
Yep.
And where it's one thing to get laid off and have to deal with that. If you're an entrepreneur, like you have to make this huge conscious decision to stop, to divest, to try to sell, salvage what you can. I remember being my first business was a line of meat marinades for wild game. I don't
Mm.
like to cook and I don't hunt. So this was a terrible business for me. But my dad's a hunter and he had this great duck marinade and I thought I could commercialize it. And then my professor at Cal Poly was like, this is a great business plan that you wrote for my class. You need to go do this. So then what do I do? Like, oh, sure, this is a great idea. I should go do this. I learned that I love entrepreneurship, but I also did not want to be at a Cabela's for one more Saturday demoing this meat marinade on
Right.
cooked chicken. I'm pregnant with my first child. I'm miserably morning sick all day for 9 months. And my husband happened to be at this Cabela's with me in Maine where we were sampling. And I turned to him and I said, I'm done. He goes, okay. And I said, I don't care if I sell this business or shut it down, but I am done. And he goes,
Right.
oh, okay. Finding those moments of clarity at any
Yeah.
point in our lives,
Right.
it's like,
Right.
okay, if that's the truth, if that's really my truth, now there have to be a bunch of steps that follow this.
Hmm.
And it's it's just an interesting journey that we're
Yeah.
all
Yeah. 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 It's all about alignment, clarity, being honest with yourself, being honest, not feeling like you need to be performing against somebody else's goals, and staying true to your own ambitions and your North Star, what's driving you forward. um, that that's where you find the happiness and success.
and I think it's we all get busy being busy. And I think we've gotten to a place in society where even like I try when I'm at the airport or I'm in a waiting room, I try so hard not to pick up my phone and check my email, check Instagram, check, and just physically be present because I think it's so easy to never have to do any introspection because our lives can be so busy and full
Hmm. Hmm.
that then, well, what are my goals? Are they
Right.
my goals or are they the things I thought I was supposed to do? And sitting quietly is getting harder and harder, and it takes more intentionality.
Yep.
And that's a great practice for all of us to
Yep.
be thinking about it, and especially encouraging our kids to do because they don't. I remember being at the airport, my kids fly alone to their grandma's house in Colorado. They started when they were 5. It's a really cool thing for them. It was like 5:30 in the morning. They were taking an early flight and we were sitting at the airport and it's pretty dark in there because it's still dark outside and there's so many windows in the airport. And my daughter looks around, she's like, Mom, these people look like zombies because they're all have their phones that are lighting up their faces. And I was like, whoa, they do. And
Yeah.
they didn't
Yeah.
want to be alone. They didn't want to
Right.
be
Yeah. Yeah. That's
present.
another great self-care practice, is developing some type of, whether it's meditation or praying, something where you sit quietly intentionally and just give yourself a moment to think and to give yourself a moment to pause. And it might be in those quiet moments that the light bulb goes off and you have a moment of clarity and understanding. But giving yourself that like time to just sit quietly, be present, be intentional is really important.
And it feels super lame when you get started, right? It feels like, what am I doing?
It's awkward.
400
It is.
chores I should be doing right now.
Yeah. It's awkward. It is. I don't know if it ever gets easier. But it's just the smallest, a few minutes, a few good deep breaths, somewhere quiet. It can be a reset in the smallest way.
I found I'm really, really bad at sitting still. So any kind of quiet space in my head while sitting still, it just, it's almost impossible for me. So my
Yeah.
strategy has been to take walks. Because
Yeah.
if my body is physically moving, my mind has a lot easier time being
Hmm.
still. And
Hmm.
so that's been one of my strategies because I hear people talk about how great their meditation sessions are. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. I can't seem to get there. I have to do something else.
Yeah, there's a great book by Tim Ferriss, and it talks about all of these. He does these short interviews with all these like really famous, successful people, and in many of them, he talks about like their morning routine and how they start their day. And I swear, I felt like everybody was starting their day with some sort of meditation that was like
Yeah.
successful, right? And sometimes like even if it's hard for you and you don't want to do it, but just learning from other people who have done it, that you see how successful they've been and they like swear by it, like, okay, well, I got to give this a try. And
Yeah.
yeah,
A bunch of successful people can't be wrong. They're all doing the
exactly,
same thing.
right.
But you can still find your own way to it. Well, I feel like there have been a lot of good tips, a lot of good resources shared. Maybe one last one I would share, I actually shared this in the last podcast I recorded, was this book called Letting Go. And
Yeah,
it
yeah.
is phenomenal. I can't remember the author's name, but it's a white and yellow cover. And
Is it Adam Grant or
no,
no? It's not
it's
Adam
much
Grant.
older than that.
Okay.
Um,
I know the one you're talking about.
I can't remember. It's a
Yeah.
little bit dry, but the content is so. I listened to it twice this summer. I like
Mm,
finished it and started it over because I was
okay.
getting so much value out of this conversation. I was like, I think I need to start again. So I think that's what I'd add. I think this idea of how do we decouple? It cannot all be about work. How do we find our own self-worth? How do we spend a little bit of time volunteering and be thoughtful about what it is that we can do to bring the world value gets us back on track,
Mhm.
no matter which track we've gotten off of. And I'm so grateful that you took the time to write your book, that you took the time to spend time with us on the You've Got People Problems podcast. And I hope to have you back sometime. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks so much. It's a pleasure to be here. I really appreciate it.
Oh, last before we go, if people would like to contact you, what is the best way to reach out?
You can visit my website. It's thestevejaffe.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Instagram. I'm on Substack also. We mentioned Substack earlier. And you can visit Amazon.com. Just type in The Layoff Journey. My book will pop up. And I hope everybody would check it out that feels like they need a little help in navigating grief after job loss.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you. And I hope to see you soon.
Thanks a lot.
Well, that's a wrap on this episode of You've Got People Problems. If you got something out of the conversation, make sure to subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with the other leaders in your network, because let's face it, we all have people problems. You can watch full episodes on YouTube or listen on your favorite podcast app. But either way, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.